NCHE did not start out as some kind of big organization. It started out just with homeschool parents trying to homeschool their kids, trying to figure it out. And they were committed and they were faithful, and they needed connection. They needed to be equipped. They needed protection. They're trying to establish legislation. And so they worked hard to get that done. And that's what NCHE has become, is an organization committed to carrying that on.
Welcome to the Homeschool Show. I'm Amanda Wares, your host, and I have with me our awesome co-host, Melanie Willis, once again. Hey, Melanie.
Hello.
How we doing? And what do we have for today?
Things are good. I had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you did. All right. So this is week 2 of our Homeschool in Sports series. And you will sit down and speak today with Paul from NCHE AC so that we can learn a little bit more about sports in North Carolina, across the state. And then it's going to be wonderful. You talked to your own son, Killian Wares, about his perspective on sports while homeschooling. And then we will have, again, putting Amanda in the hot seat to answer some questions that we have seen on the internet, and then some homeschool news. And so I look forward to all of this.
Absolutely. Sounds fun. Let's check out those interviews. I am here with Paul Bunke, and he is going to share with us a little bit more about homeschool sports. So, Paul, would you please just introduce yourself to our watchers and listeners, just about you personally, your homeschool sports, and all that?
Absolutely. Be happy to. I'm Paul Bunke. I live in Surry County up here in the foothills of northwestern North Carolina, and have been homeschooling for 25 years, I think. Our oldest just turned 30.
Okay.
We have 7 boys, and so we've been very involved with homeschool sports too. But it all kind of stems out of the desire for home education and be able to teach our kids our faith, as well as really take responsibility for their education. Our homeschool sports journey started when our oldest one is in 7th grade, so I guess we're going on 17, 18 years now. Still have 2, have 4 that have graduated out of that. We have one son with special needs who is the biggest fan but didn't participate himself. And
Gotcha.
So the idea behind our program up here in Surry, and then NCHEAC in general, is to provide a quality athletic experience. In other words, it's a notch above what you'll usually experience in community sports, or the kind of recreational leagues and things like that. It's competitive, and so it's been a great experience for us. And I've been very involved. Our boys have been very involved in both basketball and cross country. So
Oh, yeah.
so we've been active here for a while. Myself, currently the athletic director of our program, serve as the newest. I'm a provisional member on the state council, so involved or learning how to be involved in setting policy for the state and the conference. I spent many years as a coach. Have friends with a lot of the other programs, and so just glad to be involved. It's been a great blessing to our family, and we've met many lifelong friends through this.
That's amazing. And I can speak personally to the quality of your program up there in Surry. My son plays for the South Guilford Cougars, and we've
Awesome.
played you guys, and there is
Awesome.
definitely, you guys are tough. You're a tough team. So it's awesome
Great.
it's so much fun. I know I have, as I've had my boys have been involved in various sports, and it is fun to go around and see these other teams from across the state and how they're really good, and that competitive, thing going on. It's really been a blessing to our family as well. So what would you say? I know you said all your boys, to one degree or another, have been involved in sports. What would you say has been the benefit of sports with your homeschool? Why have you, stayed involved with that, gotten involved with that, and all of that?
You've prompted me and reminded me to say something I was going to say a minute ago, where even our boys. So it seems like every other one has been like really interested in athletics.
Mhm.
That off one had other interests or whatever. But what we told him is, I said, okay, well, we're a homeschool. We need a physical education credit. So
Mhm.
unless you come up with something else that meets mom and dad's approval, then we're at least going to run cross country. And so, my thinking when I told my boys, the ones that weren't as naturally drawn to sports, as I said, you know, it takes a lot of discipline, takes a lot of commitment. Obviously, team building almost sounds cliche when it's an actual team, but that phrase means something because people had good experiences with athletics when they were growing up, and it
Mhm.
certainly, you know, keeps us out of trouble, gives us something to do that we can have something to show for afterwards, and
Mhm.
requires a level of discipline and follow through and working well with others that's very unique to athletics if athletics is done the right way. So
Right. Yeah. I love that. And I know we talk a lot on this show about it and just in just general that homeschooling is life. Life is homeschooling. It all goes together. It's discipleship. We're walking along, living life with our kids. And that extends to the sports experience also. I know some of the best mentors in particularly my son's lives have been their coaches. And
absolutely.
that is really and some of their best friends have been people they played with on those teams. So that's been a blessing to us, and it sounds like to you guys as well.
Absolutely.
So if somebody, I see this question a lot out on social media and just get the question a lot, my I'm pulling my kid out of public school. We want to homeschool, but what about sports?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell our audience a little bit about what NCHEAC is and kind of what it has to offer. Just an
Absolutely.
overview.
What the conference is trying to do is to provide some of that structure. I mean, one of the knocks on homeschooling is that we sort of have to make our own structure because it by definition is unstructured. And, so it provides, all right, here's a standard that
Mhm.
that really everybody has to meet. And along with that, you get to compete in conference play. You get to, potentially win state championships. And, and those aren't given away, those have to be earned. And
Right.
so, it is intended to be similar to the sports experience that people in schools are enjoying. We play against a lot of those organizations. I mean, depending on the sport and depending on the program, you're going to interact with Christian schools, charter, obviously other homeschool organizations, because we'll have our conference schedule, we'll have our non-conference schedule, but specifically as it relates to NCHEAC, um, the conference and the league, some of these terms are used interchangeably, which is
Yeah.
supported and served by the council who makes the decision and upholds the rules, is
Mhm.
attempting to give a quality athletic experience that rivals what might be experienced at school,
Yeah.
so that you don't feel like you're missing that. I mean, we all have our own reasons that we homeschool, but I mean, I think a lot of us, the motivation of our heart is quality, excellence, and all of that. And so we don't want to settle.
Yeah.
If we're doing it, we want to do it right.
Right. Exactly. I think that's awesome. And just off the top of your head, what are some of the sports that are offered?
Oh goodness, yeah. And I looked this up before because I've only ever been involved in two. We only have two in our
Yes.
program, although we've been presented with the possibility. But in addition to basketball and cross country, which are the ones I know specifically, I know there's baseball, I know there's volleyball, I know there's track, there's even
Mm.
fencing, which I thought was
Wow.
really, really interesting. But again, it's an amazing sport, requires a lot of discipline. And I know
Mhm.
I'm leaving one out. I wanted to keep the NCHEAC website up so I could get them all. But I'm missing swimming. Swimming, that's another one.
There you go. There you go.
So yeah, yeah. So and,
Awesome.
and do a great job. I have no doubt that the other sports that we haven't participated in, because I've heard from others who have, are done really well by our state council and by our conferences.
Awesome. And we will definitely put a link to the NCHEAC website in our show notes so people can just click on the link and go and see all the information.
Right along the top, there's literally a drop down that gives a list. Here are all the sports. And you can find the ones
Perfect.
I'm forgetting, because I think there's one I'm forgetting.
Okay, awesome. That is so great. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I've talked to a lot of people that serve the homeschool community in other states. And I think we are so blessed in North Carolina to have such a well-run and organized and wonderful sports program for homeschool students. And it's pretty unique in the whole country. I'm grateful as a mom, I'm grateful as a homeschool leader to all of you that serve on the council and what you do to make sports, available and excellent for our kids. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to talk to you and to share some of the things that it's been such a blessing to us and to many that we know.
All right. I am here with someone very special, my own son, Killian Wares. This is super fun to get to interview one of my kids. So, Killian, would you please just tell everybody, our watchers and listeners, a little bit about yourself and maybe your experience with homeschool and sports?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Killian Wares. I'm her eldest son, second oldest child. I am 24. I'll be 25 here in a little bit. I was homeschooled for my entire education up until the time I was about 16. I did 2 years of dual enrollment and then 4 years of college at Western Carolina University. I played a bunch of different sports, primarily as far as like school sports. I played football. I also did swimming, taekwondo, baseball, judo slash sambo. So a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Okay. And so I think, if I'm remembering correctly, football was the only homeschool specific sport that you played, right?
Yeah. Yeah, baseball was rec league, and I stopped playing that before I got to high school. So really, kind of core like homeschool
Yes.
sport. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And so, would you say that playing sports throughout your school kind of career benefited you? Do you think it helped you either as a student, just as a person? What do you think?
Um, I mean, I'd say from the kind of the basic stereotypical answers where like, organized sports teach you how to be around people, work together, teamwork. It puts you in a situation, as long as you do have good coaches, that you're, able to kind of receive mentorship from people that more than likely have similar values to you. If you're usually in a homeschool league, those are probably dads or family members of other homeschool students. But yeah, I don't think it had too big of an impact in terms of like education, other than somewhere to get my energy
Okay.
out.
I mean, that's a good point. That's a good outlet for sure. So, as you were getting into high school and getting a little more serious about playing football, and I know that you thought about, at least a little bit later in high school, thought about playing in college. And then ultimately, you did not play in college. So, could you tell everybody a little bit about that process and kind of what led you to end up not playing in college?
Yeah. So I think the interest came from about my sophomore year of high school. I kind of finally had a coach that was a little more serious. He had coached at a semi-professional level, so he kind of knew that upper level of sports and had kind of introduced that to me, as well as, I kind of hit a pretty big growth spurt. So I got into that like upper echelon of what people consider like your ideal size collegiate athletes. So that
Right.
helps, you kind of look at metrics, you're like, oh, I'm bigger than that guy. Yeah. As far as the trying to make the transition, it was pretty difficult. Unfortunately, the program that I was playing in, no one really had any connections. I learned later, as well as going through the process of trying to play in college, that pretty much getting into college is almost all to do with like who your coaches know, unless you're just that like god tier level athlete that everyone in the country knows who you are, and then it doesn't matter. But if
Yeah.
you're not that person, like most of us, then, who your coach knows has a really big impact on your ability to kind of get looks and be scouted, go through that whole experience. So I kind of had to try my best to replicate that. I actually ended up applying to over 150 colleges. I had written letters to probably 300 schools. I probably had 2-a-day meetings with different coaches, just being like, hey, I'd love to come play for your school if you'll give me money. I did that for probably 6 or 8 months. It was most of the summer and then the whole fall semester. So probably about 6 or 8 months. Kind of got some interest, but from lower level, like JUCO level schools, didn't really want to go down that route. So we ended up going to Western and touring, and I just was like, you know what, I just like this school so much that I'm gonna go here regardless. And then unfortunately I technically got a little bit of a recruiting opportunity where I was offered an opportunity to be a walk-on at the school. And then after I got there, like a month after I started school, the athletic director and the entire football staff all got fired. And the new people that came on had no idea who I was, and they were having such a hard time trying to like get things going that they just didn't host walk-on events my first semester there, and then COVID happened and they didn't do walk-ons anymore in the entire NCAA. And by then I was 2 years in and had an opportunity to graduate in 3 years if I took extra classes. So I just chased that.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it was just like circumstance after circumstance.
Yeah.
So looking back at that, high school in particular, and thinking about all that process of trying to get, recruited or whatever,
Mhm.
what would you have done differently looking back?
I think there kind of has to come a point where if you believe in yourself or you think that you have that opportunity, there has to be a point somewhere in your high school education, probably earlier the better, where you sit down and just kind of decide like, this is the thing that's important to me. And if that is the route you're going to go, then I think it's probably, you got to do whatever you're going to do to chase that.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, unlike other sports, football doesn't really have multi seasons. There's not travel football leagues. There's not, having like a personal trainer isn't really going to be enough, so if football is your thing, like it was for me, and you really have that dream of playing like Division I college football, you probably would have, and we had talked about this at that time of not homeschooling anymore and trying to go join a public school or a different school or something. And just to have that opportunity to kind of be more in the system in order to get, looks from scouts or get scouted at all. So yeah, that would probably be something that I would have changed. Also, I would have probably been a little more realistic about if football was the dream, which it wasn't as much for me, but I know for other people that I know that it can be like that is the ultimate goal more than education even. I probably would have been better off to go into a JUCO program or a lower level school training program. Even just in the last couple of years since I was in high school, it's the ability to transfer between schools and colleges is a lot easier now. So I probably would have pursued that. Or
Okay.
if it was today, I would definitely pursue that.
Yeah. And I think that, again, it's to me, having, done this a long time, I think one of the beauties of homeschooling is being able to make that kid's education work for them. And like in your case, if that meant I really want to play football in college, then that probably would have looked a little different than the choices that we made at the time. But
Yeah.
it all worked out, and here you are.
I'm allotted.
That's right. And so, would you give any other advice to current, families, kids that are homeschooling, that are athletes? Do you have any advice or anything you'd want to say to them?
Starting as early as possible in the process. I didn't decide that I had any interest in playing until, probably after my junior year. So there are a lot of kids that already have college offers and have committed and stuff by then. I hadn't even started. So by the time I really started, most of these schools had already filled up their rosters. So start as early as possible, record everything. As cool of a highlight tape you can put together, it makes you look better. For all the parents, it's a great opportunity to force your kids into like professional writing practice. I know I probably wrote 30 different versions of a letter, like self-introduction, here's my grades, this is what I do in football. And, I think the first one was probably terrible, which is probably why I didn't get any attention. But by the 30th rendition, it was pretty good, So I got a lot of responses on the last one. So, it's just a skill to improve.
That's awesome. All right. Thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really love that Paul was willing to sit down and talk to me. He is new to the athletic council, but it was so wonderful. I told him I thought he had such a great perspective because he has been a coach. He is a homeschool dad. All of his kids are athletes themselves. And now he's a part of the NCHE Athletic Council. I just think it was a great perspective to hear from him and to hear all that NCHE AC has to offer in the state, because a lot of people don't know how many teams, how many different sports are available to homeschool students.
That's right. That's right. And it sounds like, anybody that has a heart for children could come in and do that job, but having all that extra experience certainly has to play into him being really good at doing that job. And so it's a really awesome opportunity. And so we will put the link to the NCHE AC in the show notes so that you can check out what is near you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can search on that website for sports, the different teams, whether you basketball, soccer, volleyball, golf, fencing, swimming. There's just such a variety out there. So you can see what's available in your area. And then it was such a treat to get to sit down and interview my son, Killian, and talk about his experience. And whenever I asked him about doing this interview, he said, "Well, Mom, do I need to edit myself?" Because part of his experience is he played football, and there are not very many homeschool specific football teams. And so he went as far as he could go, and he could have played in college. But now looking back, he does wish that he had had more exposure, like either playing at a private school, public school, or club kind of team, because the exposure was not available to him in the football realm. It's not like right now in North Carolina, there are tons of basketball teams. There's tons of volleyball teams. And those student athletes, they get exposure to, college coaches and college scouts. And a lot of them do, if they want to go on and play in college. But he didn't really have that opportunity. And so he was a little bit worried that he wasn't going to be allowed to voice that opinion. And I said, it's fine, because that was our experience. We didn't know what the situation was. And so I thought that would be helpful to other students out there, that maybe if you're a football player, maybe that'll be helpful to you. So that was really fun. Okay. Today we are starting to think about our year-end giving. And this year we want to focus on the foundation of history and support that NCHE has built over the last 40 years to help families homeschool with confidence and joy. So today I have with me our Executive Director and President, Matthew McDill. So, hey, Matthew, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Amanda.
All right. So when you look at NCHE's history, what do you think is most significant about what has been built?
Yeah, I think what stands out to me when I look backward is that NCHE did not start out as some kind of big organization. It started out just with homeschool parents trying to homeschool their kids, trying to figure it out. And they were committed and they were faithful and they needed connection. They needed to be equipped. They needed protection. They're trying to establish legislation. And so they worked hard to get that done. And that's what NCHE has become, is an organization committed to carrying that on. And we've come from those few families now to our annual Thrive Homeschool Conference in Winston, to our Greenhouse magazine. We have an amazing website full of information and encouragement. We have this podcast, we have our webinars, we have graduations and scholarships, we have field trips and sports. So it's amazing what's been built over the last 40 years from that beginning point, but all of it is built for the same reason, to keep helping parents homeschool with confidence and joy. And so that's what we want to keep doing.
Yes, I love that. That is so. You have had so many conversations with different families over the years. Is there one story that just really captures for you what this foundation does for parents?
Yeah, there is a story I really can't forget, because it was a mom who came to the conference one year, and she'd been many years. But this particular year was different because before she came to the conference, just before, she had filled out the paperwork to put her youngest child into school. She'd already been homeschooling her kids, but she was just run down, burned out. She said, I just can't do it anymore. And so she was going to put her last child in school. Well, she said God just spoke to her powerfully through all the speakers and workshops and the fellowship of being there. And by the end, she was ready to go. She was excited and inspired and ready to recommit to the vision of homeschooling and discipling our kids at home. It was an amazing testimony. Again, the real heroes, of course, are the parents who are doing the work, but we are trying to create that space so that they have the strength and the ability to continue to do it.
That's such a touching story. And I think so many of us can relate, as moms and dads that have been in the trenches for a long time, and how much we need that encouragement. So as people think about giving at the end of the year, what would you want them to hear? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think first is, if you are listening to this, maybe on our podcast or on social media, and you have benefited from what NCHE has become and all that has been built, then this is a way of you saying thank you, and a way of you investing in so many thousands of other families who need what we're doing. And it may be that you're hearing this for the first time and think, wow, I want to be a part of this. Your gifts, your support helps this nonprofit ministry continue, because that's how we fuel everything that we're doing, is from the generous donations and support of the homeschool families that we serve.
That's so important. All right. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for sharing with us, for meeting with me today, and to our listeners, to all of you out there. If NCHE has been an important part of your homeschool journey, we invite you to partner with us. You can go to nche.com/give. Thank you so much.
All right. So now, are you ready, Amanda? We are going to look at some questions that we have seen on the internet. So the first question that I have for you, it says, I have begun to wonder if my child needs to be tested for dyslexia. Do I need to send them back to public school, or how else can he be tested?
Okay. So I have kind of a little different perspective on this because I do have a child with dyslexia. In fact, it is the same son that you all heard from earlier today. We actually chose never to have him formally tested. And I think this is something you as a parent, as a family, really need to think about whether it will be of benefit to your child in the future to be formally tested and have that diagnosis or label or not. In my son's case, he was not severely dyslexic enough, if that makes sense, that he was able to really compensate for his struggles with reading. You know, we did a lot of audiobooks. Uh, I always growing up read a lot to him. And then even when he started doing dual enrollment at the community college, he was able to, record the lectures and be able to listen to them back or do different things that were perfectly fine. And he did very well at community college. He did very well in college. He does very well even now as a whole grown up with a job out in the world without that dyslexia diagnosis. However, if he had been more severe in his dyslexia, or if he had had other issues happening at the same time, I think it probably would have helped for him to be actually formally diagnosed, to be able to get some different accommodations or different things like that. So if you want that formal diagnosis, there's a couple ways you can go about it. No, he does not have to go back into the public school system to have that done, although you can reach out to them to have your child be evaluated. So the way that you do that is you contact your local school exceptional children department, if they have a department. The head of that is usually the one you want to talk to, and you put a request in writing for your child to be evaluated for potential dyslexia or whatever it is. In this case, we're talking about dyslexia. And the educational psychologist probably at the school or the school psychologist can do that evaluation. The reason you put it in writing is because legally, once you put it in writing, the school has 90 days to respond and set that up. So you want to start that timeline. If you don't want to go through the school system, you can absolutely go privately, find a educational psychologist. Again, in private practice, they can evaluate. Sometimes even a speech language pathologist possibly could evaluate for dyslexia, or if they can't, they will find you somebody who can. So definitely, maybe you need that official diagnosis and label, maybe not. But that is a decision for you to make. But absolutely, you do not need to put your child back into public school to have that done. And I could talk for a really long time about ways, why I think homeschooling is great for kids that are dyslexic, but that'll be another episode.
Well, and I can also speak a little bit to that because I had a son that's pretty severely dyslexic. I will say right now, he is out there as a grown up adult and he does perfectly fine. But he was diagnosed through a specialty doctor at our regular doctor's office. And then they said, if you want an IEP because he's going to be going on to college, we can go help you maneuver through the school system to get the IEP for you to carry on with you. But we chose not to, and he's doing fantastic. I think that, being able to homeschool, you do have the abilities to look up all these things that other people use that help them. And, we had special different colored, like transparency paper, and
yeah.
you can figure out which color works best for your child, and it helps them to figure out what line they're on. And that worked great for him. So,
Yes.
all right. So your next question is, I've just started homeschooling high school and I'm thinking ahead. What qualifies as a credit and what is required on the diploma?
Okay. So I'm not exactly sure about that second question.
I can answer that. Yeah. because technically there's very little actual requirement, but my suggestion is that if you're not going to purchase one through NCHE or some other business and you're going to make your own, you can actually go out and get a template off the internet that is practically already made, and you just need to put in, it needs your homeschool name, it needs your student's name, it needs the date and the location, where in North Carolina or what other state you live in, and then it needs to have a signature of your administrator for your school. That might be you, that might be your husband. Here, my husband is the principal. Or, if you had a family friend that did most of the schooling, maybe that's going to be who signs it. But that's really all that you have to have on it. If you get it through NCHE, then it will also have our president's signature on one side of that, and the seal for NCHE.
Yes. I highly recommend the NCHE diploma. All 3 of my graduates have had it, and it is very nice. So that's a little plug for the NCHE diploma. Now, what qualifies as a credit? I get this question all the time. And I talk to a lot of people about homeschooling high school, so I guess that's probably why. But the problem, or good thing, depends on how you look at it, depends on your perspective, is, as we've said, in North Carolina, once you open your homeschool, you are basically your own little private school. You decide the graduation requirements. You decide what is a credit. Now, if you go out there and Google what qualifies as a credit, you will come up with something. You'll find a lot of different opinions on what qualifies as a credit. The actual answer is, it is 100% up to you. If you, as the head of your homeschool, feel that your child has done enough work to qualify as a full credit, then it is a full credit. And that is perfectly legal and acceptable and all of that. Now, when you go out there and Google, you will find a lot of sources will say, if they spend between 120 to 180 hours in a year, then that is enough to qualify as a credit. So if you feel more comfortable using that kind of a timeline to, just to feel like it's legit or whatever, that's totally fine. But again, the actual real legal answer is, it's completely up to you. I know a lot of parents really don't like to hear me say that, but because it feels, more responsibility, I have to decide. And it's difficult sometimes, but I think once you get into it, you will have a good feeling of, my child spent this whole year learning how to repair small motors, lawnmowers or whatever. And so you can 100% give them a credit for engine repair or whatever it is, So I think you'll get a feel for it once you're in the situation, but don't be afraid.
Yeah.
But it really is up to you.
Well, and some students just can master things faster than others. So I think it's really hard to put a label on an exact time frame.
It really is. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's listen to some homeschool news.
Awesome. Hello, this is Lynn Pierre here. I'm here with NCHE, and this is your homeschool news. The number one thing I would like for you to remember is membership has its benefits. Are you a member of the NCHE? Well, if you are, members will receive 40% off of rentals at the Havens at Greenwood Glen. Now, if you haven't been to Greenwood Glens before, it's in Jefferson, North Carolina, right off the Blue Ridge Parkway. If you go to their website, you'll be able to see they have 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom stays. And because you're getting 40% off, you can invite me and my family also. How are you going to find out about this? Go to their website. Their website is haven@greenwood.com. And don't worry about if you don't get it. All these websites and all the contacts and connections are going to be down in the show notes. Now, moving on. Have you done all your Christmas shopping? Do you like basketball? Hornets Day. NCHE Hornets Day is coming up this January the 24th at the Spectrum Arena in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you want more details about getting this awesome Christmas gift and joining NCHE at a Hornets basketball game, go to our website, nche.com/activities. All the information is there. Next, I want you to be on lookout for the annual Mid-Winter Chess Tournament and a special field trip to the Sullenberg Aviation Museum. That's going to take place this February. And once again, everything will be on our website. Now, for all of y'all that are looking for scholarship money, today is the opening of the 2026 NCHE Scholarship Competition. Why is this scholarship so awesome? Because it was started back in, 1998 is when the scholarship started. And NCHE has awarded over $200,000 to students. Now, this one, if you want to find out more information about this, go to our website and look for the section titled Graduate Central. That's where you're going to find all the information about entering into this graduation scholarship competition. So like I said before, everything that I mentioned is going to be down below in the show notes. So I thank you once again for joining me. I'm Lynn Pierre, and this is your NCHE Homeschool News. Have an exceedingly and abundantly awesome day.
So next episode, we will have Nikki Cooper, our special needs support coordinator, and we will also hear from Catherine Marker, and she is going to give you a bit of information and knowledge on how to apply for your ESA Plus money. And those applications aren't due until February, but you need to be gathering all of the information that you need to apply for that right now. If you wait until February, there's no way that you're going to get everything together that you need for that. And so if you will tune in next episode, you can hear all about that.
Awesome. That is so exciting. So everybody, as always, please help us out by liking, sharing, subscribing, and we want to hear from you. So send your questions, your comments, your suggestions. Do you have a suggestion of something you would like us to talk about on this show, or someone you'd like us to interview? Please send it to us. You can reach us at thehomeschoolshow@nche.com. So until next time, keep homeschooling with confidence and joy. Bye-bye.